Recording in progress.
So we're letting some folks load in here. Just a moment.
Mark, you're going into shadow again.
All right. Rob, I think we can get it started.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. My name is Robert Anslow. I'm a partner with Atkinson Andelson. We're district's bond and legal counsel for various purposes. The committee has made me the acting chairperson moving forward. So essentially my job is to chair the meeting. Again, the committee has loosely referenced Robert's Rules of Order without formally adopting them. We'll go through the process and discuss the agenda items as posted. Michelle, can I ask you to call the roll of the COC members?
Katie Hazen.
Here.
Kathy Huang.
Here.
Mark Magenti.
Here.
Sandeep Patel.
Here.
Joe Smith.
Here.
And Fushao Shin is not, she's not present.
Yeah, she'd be shown as absent, and we have a vacant position. So we have a quorum of the COC. We have 5 members present and online, which means that it will only take 3 affirmative votes on any matter that the COC will vote on, just for people's reference. Chris, if you could maybe discuss a little bit about why we have a vacant position on the COC and what the expectation is with that position.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob. So at this point, we do have 1 vacant position. We had 4 members from our original COC who did not return for a second term. And in going out, we publicized and published an advertisement and received 6 applicants. We interviewed, and the board approved 3 new representatives who are here tonight, and welcome. It's great to see you, Mark and Sandeep and Joe. We did not have an applicant for the senior citizen position, and the district is still actively doing some recruiting, and we would hope that we will be able to bring somebody to the board at the June board meeting, and we would hope that we would be able to bring somebody and have a senior citizen representative at our next COC meeting. So that is the 7th member that is not currently a member, but again, the district is working actively to find somebody who will fill that role.
Thank you, Chris. So again, right now the committee consists of 6 members. The normal statutory number is 7, and the district is working to fill that. Chris, do we have any requests for public comments?
We do not.
Okay, so we'll skip past the public comments portion, going to item D, introductions. And this is mostly for the benefit of the new COC members, just so we all kind of introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Robert Anslow. I go by Rob. I'm a partner with Atkinson Andelson. I'm the acting chairperson. Our firm is also the bond counsel and district counsel for a number of legal issues to the Delmar Union School District. So we'll kind of go across and maybe go to Chris.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Chris Delahanty, the Executive Director of Capital Programs and Technology for the school district.
And maybe Holly, if you're there.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Holly McClurg, the Superintendent of the Delmar Union School District.
And Mark.
Mark Pong, Director of Finance for the district.
And Kathy.
Hi, good evening. Kathy Burks, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services.
And we'll go through the COC members. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Hazen. I'm the parent-teacher organization representative, and I have kids at Troy Hill School.
And Katie is one of our returning veterans. Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Huang. I'm the business person representative on the COC. And I had a daughter who went through Delmar Union at Sage Canyon many years ago. So I'm a former PTA exec board and longtime Delmar Union School District supportive.
And Kathy is also one of our returning veterans. Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark Regenti. I'm the parent representative on the board, and I'm the parent of a current Delmar Heights second grader.
Thank you, Mark. Send it.
Hi, I'm Cindy Patel. I'm representing the San Diego County Taxpayers Association.
Thank you. And Joe.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Joe Smith. I am a community at-large member. Happy to be here. And I've got two girls at Delmar Hills in second and third grade.
All right. Let me see. Did we miss anybody? I think we got everybody. Okay. With that done, we will. I would invite.
Rob, Michelle.
I'm sorry?
Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Bothy. I'm the Administrative Assistant for Business Services at the Delmar Union School District.
I'm sorry, I skipped over you. I apologize for that. Also, in introductions, as I said, the committee generally functions under Robert's Rules of Order. Because we're working with a Zoom meeting, if you want to speak, please raise your hand and unmute yourself so we can recognize you as we move through discussion processes. On actions, the normal process is a motion, second, discussion, and then a roll call vote, which Michelle will call in each case. You can indicate in favor, oppose, or vote to abstain. All of those are acceptable options. Again, because we have 5 members of the committee here, a majority of the quorum is 3 members to approve any given motion. So with that said, we will move to item E, approval of the March 8th, 2021 minutes of the committee. And I understand that the newer committee members may not have, you weren't here. This is essentially an authorization to publish those minutes. If you have questions with regard to their accuracy, we would defer to the 2 veteran members who were here for that meeting or members of staff. So do I have a motion to approve the March 8th minutes?
I can motion to approve the March 8th minutes.
Motion by Katie. Is there a second?
I second Kathy Huang.
There's Kathy. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Michelle, please.
Katie,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Joe,
Abstain?
Okay, so that's 4-0 with 1 abstention, which means that motion passes. Thank you, members of the committee. The next couple of items are discussion items by myself. Mark, if we could bring up the purpose document for people to reference. Thank you. I'm going to talk here from this document, which was available to the COC members. The 2 veterans have seen this document before, and it is in the COC notebooks, which hopefully have been provided to all the COC members. If not, it's available online. Let me kind of skip back a little bit to Measure MM. Measure MM was a general obligation bond measure put forward to the community by the Delmar Union School District in 2018. It was called pursuant to various provisions of state law, including, as you see in the first paragraph, Proposition 39, which was approved by the state electorate in 2000. And Proposition 39 has a number of requirements regarding school district general obligation bonds. One of those requirements is that if the bond measure is successful, the school district that calls the bond measure has to appoint and support an independent citizens oversight committee. And the membership of that committee cannot include serving board members, employees such as teachers, or administrators or consultants of the school district. They have to be members of the community, which is you folks. The principal purpose of the committee, which is in bold right there, is to inform the public concerning the expenditure of bond revenues to be received from the sale of bonds authorized by the, and it should say Measure MM bond election there. What happens is that based upon the approval of Measure MM, which was approved in November of 2018, the school district is authorized to sell what are called general obligation bonds. And those are essentially a borrowing of money with repayment over time. The purpose, the bond funds or construction dollars are to be used for various projects. If we can flip forward to page where it says attachment 2 on the top. There we go. So as part of calling the bond election, the school district had to list all of the facilities, capital improvements, upgrades, and related costs for which the bond dollars could be expended. So when you sell the bonds, an amount of money is deposited in under state law. It is held by the county treasurer. The school district then gets to draw on that money.
Rob, you went on mute.
Rob, you're muted.
Sorry. That's probably, I'm having to put documents on my laptop, so it probably triggered a key. So those facilities projects are listed in the school facilities project list. So if there's ever a question of, well, can the school district spend bond dollars on that project, this is the document that the committee members would go to first, is to see, is that project or projects listed in the school facilities project list. Unsurprisingly, the school facilities project list is very comprehensive, designed to be fairly encompassing of capital projects and costs. Now, that doesn't mean that the school district has to list every single box of nails, colored chalk, or pencils or pens, but it has to describe in either general or specific terms what it's going to spend the money on so that the voters had an understanding of what the bond monies would be spent on. If we can go back to the first page. One of the analogies I like to use for the purpose of the Citizens Oversight Committee, and people have heard me use this analogy before, is the Citizens Oversight Committee is equivalent to an engineer sitting in the caboose of a train. Which track the train goes down, how fast the train goes, and how the cars are aligned, which are all the projects and speed of delivery of the projects, is all the purview of the engineers in the front of the train. That's the school district governing board. Purpose of the Citizens Oversight Committee, like the engineer in the caboose, is to watch for stuff falling off the train. To essentially say, yes, the train is still intact, we don't see anything falling off, or in the rare event that you were to see something untoward, and having done this for 21 years, I have yet to see that, to say, we don't think that expenditure was authorized, which is, again, I've only ever had a handful of questions even in that regard. And in each case, once we've gone through the project list, this committee has been satisfied because the school district staff is also conscious of that attachment in terms of what the bond funds can be expended on. In that paper, and I'm not going to go through it in a great deal of depth, are the responsibilities of the committee in terms of what you can look at and what activities the committee can undertake, which is listed on the second page. There you go, authorized activities. Among the things that the committee will receive are expenditure descriptions, project descriptions. Every year, the school district is responsible for doing what's called an independent financial and performance audit, which will be done by an auditing firm, an outside auditing firm, and provided to the Citizens Oversight Committee That is essentially their open books, closed books, going in, going out reconciliation of the bond funds. And also they sample expenditures based upon invoices to see, are they covered within the scope of the project list? They provide that to the committee. So these are all the types of things that the committee can choose to look at and can choose to do. But again, the committee is by and large governed by the committee members. Now, the committee has up to this point in time made me the acting chairperson, largely because, like the movie WALL-E, where everybody looks for a volunteer, everybody takes a step back and WALL-E's left there. I was the one, when everybody took the step back, left standing in front. So I have kind of been the acting chairperson for 2 years. I'm happy to relinquish that duty, but so far the committee has chosen to allow me to continue in that role. Questions on item F then for our agenda? You can probably take that down now, Chris or Mark. I'm not seeing hands. I'm not hearing excited voices. Okay. Let's go then to item G, Brown Act paper. So Chris or Mark could post that.
Wanted to spare you watching me scroll through to get to the right page.
Yeah, unfortunately, the ones I don't have pages on them.
There
it is. Okay. This is another one of the handouts. And let me explain what this is all about. For those people, for the veterans on our committee or people who have worked in government or around government, there is what's called the Ralph M. Brown Act, named for Ralph M. Brown, who was a legislator many years ago. It's also sometimes called the Open Meeting Law. And what it requires is that governing bodies of public agencies must conduct their meetings in a public forum. That normally would mean that the members of the legislative body, in this case the Citizens Oversight Committee, would gather at a place and time designated in the agenda to essentially conduct the meeting on an in-person basis. That has been disrupted by the current pandemic situation, and as staff will discuss, it's something that we'll probably be stepping out of at the next Citizens Oversight Committee meeting. But what it requires is a number of things, and again, I will invite your attention to the paper. It requires that before the meeting can be held, an agenda listing all of the items of business has to be posted both physically and on the internet for any member of the public to look at. And the goal is that all of the items that the legislative body are going to discuss will be done in an open manner at that meeting. There are no secret ballots, and everybody has to be heard by members of the public who are present. A meeting, for purposes of the Brown Act, as discussed in the paper, is a congregation of a majority of the members of the Citizens Oversight Committee. In this case, since we have 6, as soon as you hit 4, which is more than 50%, gathered together or talking or communicating about matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the COC, you have a potential meeting. That should be done in the open forum with an agenda. For example, if a number of the Citizens Oversight Committee members were to go to, say, a Padres game, sit together and talk nothing but baseball, you wouldn't have a meeting. But if 4 of them were sitting at that Padres game and started to talk about the expenditure of funds on, let's say, the Delmar Heights School, at that point in time, you have a discussion outside of the meeting format. And that's essentially prohibited by the requirements of the law. So in general, that doesn't usually happen. The place where it can occur is usually, and this is kind of the, if I had a alert button to put up on the screen, I would put up the respond to all button for emails. Because what you can get, and this has happened, is you get an email chain where staff can send information to the committee members all at the same time. That's fine. That's one-way communication from staff to the committee members, no problem. You then have one committee member who responds to all, who says, well, I'm not happy about the discussion of X, Y, and Z. I think the discussion should include this, that, and the other. You have somebody else who then hits respond to all and saying, yeah, I agree with member A about what we should do on that. And all of a sudden you have this back and forth that can potentially quickly involve many of the members of the legislative body. So if I would caution you about one thing, it's look out for responding to all on email chains. I'm not going to take up much more of your time relative to the discussions in the Brown Act, but it is a good thing for the COC members to read and is a noted solution for insomnia. It is not exciting reading, and I recognize that. But I think I've given you hopefully enough highlights that, you know, as long as we stick to communication regarding Delmar Union School District matters in the COC format and in the meeting format, particularly since our next meeting is hopefully going to be all in person, there shouldn't be an issue relative to Brown Act violations, because between both myself and the district staff, we're all very conscious of what the Brown Act limitations are. Questions? And Chris, you can probably take that down. Not seeing hands, not hearing outraged voices. Okay. Let's move to item H, which is going to be fairly quick. And Chris, if we could bring up the conflicts of interest paper. Okay, rarely, but it does happen, there is the possibility for a legal conflict of interest by a Citizens Oversight Committee member. This usually happens, and I'll give you a couple of examples, where a Citizens Oversight Committee member or a member of their immediate family is going to have some business dealings with the Delmar Union School District. That is very uncommon. I could list on the fingers of one hand all of the times it's happened in 20 years that I've been dealing with Citizens Oversight Committee members, but it does happen. Let me give you a couple of examples to kind of guide you. We had another school district where a Citizens Oversight Committee member was a registered state architect, and she was also a member of the Citizens Oversight Committee. And when she was appointed to the Citizens Oversight Committee, her firm, of which she was an equity partner, was not doing any business with that school district. About a year in, the school district issued a RFP, request for proposals, for architectural firms, and her firm threw their hat in the ring. And I got this phone call from the Assistant Superintendent of Business Services saying, is this a potential conflict of interest? And I said, you know, is there a possibility that her firm will be awarded the work? And they said, yeah, there's a really good possibility. And I said, yeah, at that point in time, because she was an equity partner in the firm and would be having financial transactions through the firm with the school district on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the COC, you get a pretty direct conflict of interest. We called her up, talked to her about it, and she said, yeah, I get that. I completely understand. And she decided to resign from the COC. Another example was a COC member who was a retired school teacher. And all of a sudden, the retired school teacher who was on the Citizens Oversight Committee was accepted for a job at that school district. That violates not only, number one, the statutory prohibition, but also puts that COC member directly as a contracting entity with that school district. So again, that officer had to resign. Let me tell you an example of a situation that did not trigger the conflict. We had a COC member who worked for Pacific Bell, back when Pacific Bell existed. And he troubleshot line issues from his home, working through the St. Louis area of Pacific Telephone, which is part of their service area. Had nothing to do with any other areas, and all he did was troubleshoot line issues. Pacific Telephone made a proposal to the school district to provide telephone switching equipment for a particular school. And I got a call from, again, the Assistant Super of Business Services and says, does this COC member have a conflict of interest? And my questions was, is he an equity holder in Pacific Telephone? And the answer was no. Does he have anything to do with this contract? No. Does he stand to make or lose money as a result of Pacific Telephone getting or not getting the contract? And they said no. And I said at that point in time, no, he doesn't have a direct conflict of interest. He chose to recuse himself to not participate in the discussions when that contract came up for review by the COC, but did not have to resign as the Citizens Oversight Committee. Again, very rare that this occurs, but we did want to make you aware of the potential for it and provide you with some information on that topic. So again, if you as a Citizens Oversight Committee member or your immediate family might have some business dealings with the school district, best thing to do is call a COC, call a district staff member and discuss it with them. Questions on that? And not seeing hands. Okay. That takes us to item I, school district facilities projects, proposed construction scheduling and capital improvement planning. Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rob. So I'm going to give an overview, this similar to an overview I gave at our initial COC meeting on the facilities projects, the construction scheduling, and our capital improvement planning for the overall bond program. So we'll look at facilities projects, scheduling, capital improvement planning. And if we look at facilities projects, Rob covered this to a certain degree, but when we look back at the facilities planning for our projects, it really started with our facilities master plan. And so our facilities master plan was developed and approved by the board in 2018. And as an example, we have Ashley Falls School, which has a write-up and a review of the school, looked at the age of the school, some general characteristics of the school. And then through the facilities master plan, we looked at focus areas and then looked at areas of need. So the facilities master plan identifies modernization and renovation, modern learning studio, technology infrastructure, innovation center exterior throughout the school. And so it looked at areas that needed renovation. And this was the document that helped us to develop the Measure and Then Bond program. And so then as we look at, and Rob mentioned and showed the Measure and Then Bond resolution. And in that resolution, we had school facilities projects, and these are master plan facilities projects and objectives. This is our general overview. So across the district, we had an overview of projects and objectives that we wanted to address throughout the bond program. And then each school site has their site laid out. And so as we look through the whole bond language, using Ashley Falls again as the example, there's specific work in addition that Ashley Falls needed to have done. And again, this is a list of work that we could do. And in addition, there is across the district where renovation repairs are needed, there are other pieces that can be done, including we may come across removal and mitigation of hazardous materials, examples such as asbestos or lead or mold, things like that may come up. There are things like contingencies, and then it goes into the project list and other items that may come up throughout the construction of a project. So then when we look at a project in totality, just to give a general idea as you're starting up on the Citizens Oversight Committee and as a refresher for our team, this is a very typical and general design to construction for a large project. So design can typically take anywhere from 12 to 15 to 18 months to go through. And that includes going through a community design process. It includes going through permitting and working through the Department of the State Architect. And that bleeds into pre-construction. And on our two main projects that we are working on right now, we have contractors that we've brought on prior to construction so that we can build a team and work together with our architect and our contractor in a pre-construction model that helps us to identify potential savings and set up the process prior to construction. And then construction can be anywhere as short as, say, 14 months for a whole school. And sometimes you will try to truncate that to a certain degree because of school years. And when we look at school years and we have campuses that may be impacted, and more typically you'd see it in an 18 to 24 month schedule. This will obviously adjust depending on the size of a modernization. And right now we have in planning and construction our Delmar Heights School and our Pacific Sky School. But as we move into our other schools and the modernizations, depending on the size of it, this will move a little bit one way or the other. So when we look at scheduling and capital improvement planning, we look at over the course of the bond program, $186 million was approved by the public. However, with bonding capacity, we can't, number one, do $186 million worth of work in the 3 years that you need when you bring in money. And we also don't have the capacity to take that much money in at one time. So we need to look at scheduling it out over a series of bond series. So we, in planning this bond program, looked at 4 series of bonds, series A, B, C, and D. And then we had budgets based on our facilities master plan and escalation. So there were initial costs built in through our facilities master plan, and then there was an associated escalation. And then we're looking at and seeing that things have gone up and down as they do. It typically tracks at 4% a year, but as we were in the middle of the recession, the pandemic, we saw that prices were a little bit lower. And as we're coming out, prices are going up very quickly. And so that will ebb and flow over the course of the 10 to 12 years that we do this. And so we track that over time as well. And then we have priorities developed through direction from the Board of Trustees as we passed the bond program and looked at identifying work to be done in these series A, B, C, and D. So as we look at Series A, right out of the gate, through the facilities master planning process, we identified 2 major needs. Delmar Heights School needed to be rebuilt, which is the rebuild, and Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, which was named by the board at our last board meeting, Pacific Sky School, was identified for the new build. We also know that Delmar Hills Academy is the oldest school in the district and needed modernization. And then as we've gone through this first series, we've had items that have come up. Torrey Hills Field had some major needs, and we've done a Torrey Hills Field upgrade. In Sycamore Ridge, we are planning to do play structure replacement this summer due to a need at that school site. As we look into Series B, and this is an anticipated date that was originally anticipated for 2021 through 2024. We have had some delays with our Delmar Heights School rebuild, and likely this series of bonds will not be 2021 through 2024. They're sold and then need to be spent over a 3-year period, or 85% of the funds in 3 years. And it's likely that this Series B will be we will pull in more around 2022. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at the funds that we may need to spend and when Delmar Heights starts, and that will help to define the Series B start date. But within that, we still will have funds spent on Delmar Heights Schools rebuild, Pacific Highlands Ranch School number 9, now Pacific Sky School, the Delmar Hills Academy modernization, and Carmel Del Mar's modernization. And then as we get into Series C, we have solar installation scheduled at the remaining schools and play improvements at the remaining schools. On those that have been done beforehand, such as our rebuild, our Delmar Hills modernization, it's included. But to reap the benefits of solar, we were looking at it at an earlier time. And as we've done work on play improvements and we see the age of our play structures, there's a need at our schools. So we look at that in Series C rather than waiting to the end of the bond program for some of our other schools. And then Carmel Del Mar, it's modernization, Ashley Falls School modernization, and Sage Canyon. And with these, because of the age of our schools, they were really modernizing by age. So Carmel Del Mar is the oldest after Delmar Hills, and then Ashley Falls was built, Sage Canyon, and then we'll come to finishing the Sage Canyon modernization in Series D, and then taking care of Torrey Hills School, Sycamore Ridge School, and Ocean Air School. And we do have some technology infrastructure at all schools and some front office upgrades. And in some cases, we've started to move those into the modernizations. And so as we can, we will be moving those into the modernizations because it means that we are impacting a school one time rather than more than one time. And in some cases, if we can do it earlier in the program and it will fit within the funding, we don't incur escalation over that time. So those are pulled out in some cases, and we're trying to fit them in as we can. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the bond program and how we look at planning for those projects and scheduling them out over the course of the bond program. Yeah, Mark?
Just a general question. Do you have a rough budget for each school's modernization?
Yes, we do. I don't have that right in front of me, but I do have a rough budget for each modernization. And so what we've done is we've taken our facilities master plan. We've prioritized items within that facilities master plan. For example, there are items like portables that through the board and staff recommendation, as we build the 9th school, replacing portables with permanent, which was originally part of a facilities master plan, would not be a need. And so there are pieces like that have come out, but other pieces have stayed in, and then we've escalated it over the course of the bond program. And so that's what's helped us to identify as well the funding that would be needed in each of those series of bonds.
So I'm just assuming if one project were to run over, you would know when maybe the projects at other schools would be impacted.
We would, but we've also budgeted in some contingency over the course of the bond program. And we continue to work to ensure that we are using our eligibility for state funds. So while the state funds aren't there immediately, an example would be Pacific Sky School, where we purchased the land and we are eligible for approximately $6 million. And so we're going through the process to get in line for that eligibility so that hopefully towards the end of the bond program, again, we have contingency, but if there are overruns, we also have state funds that would come in to backfill. And so between the contingencies and the state funds, we are working to make sure that we aren't impacting the projects that come towards the end of the program. Joe, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was following along with the question on contingency and just looking to get a general understanding of kind of what % contingency you target with your budget. And then just a general question about the sale of bonds and the use within the 3 years, the 85%. So can you explain a little bit what happens if the district does not reach 85% within that 3-year period?
So I'd defer to Rob on the I could give my best effort, but with him in the room, I'll let Rob.
Okay. So for all the members, when the district issued the first series of bonds, the Series A bonds, which Chris talked about, they were issued as what's called federally tax exempt. And what that means is that purchasers of the bonds do not pay federal income tax on the interest payments on the bonds. And for certain people in higher tax brackets, that's a very attractive quality of the bonds. It helps keep the bond yield, the interest rate that the district pays on the bonds over time, as low as possible. The Series A bonds were issued in a very favorable time, which we're still, amazingly enough, still kind of in. Very, very low bond rates for 20-plus year debt obligations. But the federal government puts a number of limitations on the bonds, the use of the bond proceeds, i.e. the construction funds. One of the things that the federal government asks for is to say at the time you issue the bonds, in this case the Series A bonds, the district had a reasonable expectation that it would spend at least 85% of the net construction proceeds within 36 months after the bonds were issued. Now, the federal government understands that things can happen to disrupt that timing expectation. In this case, we had a school project that has undergone litigation and has been delayed. So if the IRS were ever to arrive and audit the bonds and say, let's see your plan and let's see your actual expenditures, we could sit down with them and say, here was our plan at the time the bonds were issued, and that's part of the bond documentation is the plan. We would then discuss with them the fact that, there was a significant delay in one of the largest of the projects because litigation was undertaken and the school district couldn't proceed with the project until that litigation was concluded, which, by the way, it's still not completely concluded. And the IRS and the examiners understand that. There are school districts and there are public agencies who have gone out for bond issues without that reasonable expectation, basically intending to bank the money and earn arbitrage interest on it. That is not the district's intent, was not at the time the bonds were issued. So essentially, it's not an absolute bar, it's a target for expenditures. And what it's designed to do is make sure that a public agency doesn't borrow more than it needs. I hope that answers your question, Joe.
And Joe, to contingency, we have included a 5% contingency in each project, and then we had to start the program, we had about a 3% overall program contingency on top of that.
Okay. Any other questions on
item deep sand as well?
Any other questions on item I?
Just one quick question. As many are aware, the state had at the state level a windfall, and some of that money is earmarked to educational efforts. Are there any opportunities for matching funds from the state or new opportunities that weren't initially available that we can leverage in accelerating or fulfilling the promise on these projects that are now an opportunity for us?
So I'll let Mark or Kathy speak more to some of those specific to COVID, but funding specific to facilities in the state of California, there was a bond measure that was on the ballot that didn't succeed. That would be a statewide bond program. And so the statewide bond program has an unfunded amount beyond what is approved. So there is very, I would expect, and I know that there is some potential for another bond to be put forward. There have been a series of them over the last number of years, and since about 1998, with a change in funding, there's been a series of those through the state. At this point, what we do is we get in line, and with the expectation that there will be another round because there isn't enough money to fund schools across the state. And so at some point there will be a need for further state funding. Specific to pandemic, I would ask if Kathy or Mark, if there's anything you would say specific to it, but I don't know about that would in a large part augment our bond program.
Right. So as Chris had mentioned, there is a school facilities bond that we apply for and wait in line for as the funding becomes available. But as far as all the new funding that has been proposed in the governor's budget, a lot of it's for instruction-related programs and learning loss mitigation. So those funds we've been using towards our instructional programs. Some of them are a little flexible in that it can be used to for facilities if it's a COVID-related reason, like replacing HVACs or something like that. If a school needed that replacement to help filter the air better, but our funds have been mainly used for instructional purposes and purchasing like personal protective equipment, those kind of items.
Okay, do we have any other issues or questions on item I? Seeing none, we'll move to item
Rob,
J. Yes.
Rob, this is Kathy. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly. The contingency is a 3% total program contingency or total bond contingency plus 5% per project?
We put 5% into each of the projects, and when we started, we had a 3%. Although there have been some places where we've had to raise the project cost or budget, and which takes away from that original 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on item I? Okay, we'll move to item J, presentation of the bond payment log. Mark, you're up.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have our bond payment log through May 31st. We could go to the next page, Chris. You can zoom in a little bit on that. This we created just as a summary for our overall bond program. For those that are new, we have completed a few smaller projects, and we have those expenses here that show as complete. And then we have our in-progress projects, which are our larger projects: the school rebuild at Delmar Heights, the modernization at Delmar Hills, and then our school number 9 at the bottom, which is, as Chris had mentioned, just been named Pacific Sky School. We have about $24 million there. So our total project commitments right now of the 186 million is 103.5 million. So we have about $82.5 million remaining for commitment for future projects. The first project that we'll review is the Delmar Heights School. As of the last expenditure report, February 28th, 2021, we had a project budget of just under 58 million. We have a few budget adjustments, mainly for our legal costs of about 58 million, leaving us with just about 58 million exactly. As Chris had mentioned, we did have some project contingencies on this project, but some of those have moved up either into the construction costs. So we do have some contingency there, and then we use the rest on some of our legal fees that were higher than expected. And to date, we've had $3.8 million of expenditures. And we'll go into those details on the next page. Our commitments as of the last report were just under 13 million. We have new additions of about 194,000, leaving us with commitments of 13 million. Our last expenditures, we had 3.7 million. Current expenditures are 128,000 for a total expenditures of 3.8 million. Our main expenditures right now have been our legal fees, our architect design fees, and our environmental consultant fees. So currently, the board just approved another contract to continue with the coastal development permit process and the focus DIR. The next project that we have is the Pacific Sky School project. At our last meeting, we had our budget at 70 million. We did receive our bids for our increment 2 on the construction project. And so we had to increase the budget by 3.9 million. So we're splitting that between, for the people who are new, this project is being split funded through the general obligation bond and also CFD 99-1, which is one of our Mello-Roos district areas. So there's Mello-Roos taxes that are helping to pay for this project, a majority of this project. So there's a split increase on that. So our total budget now is just under 74 million. And our total expenditures to date are 14.5 million. Again, we've zeroed out the contingencies, and in this $53.6 million, we do have project contingencies for the construction of about 2.6 million and additional allowances of about 1.5 million.
Mark, where are those contingencies that you were just mentioning? Because I see it's coming out of that line item called project contingency. So is there a place on that schedule where I can identify those construction contingencies that you mentioned?
It's the one where it says main construction and the new budget is 53.6 million.
Okay.
So in that 53.6 million, we have about 4.1 million of contingencies and allowances for the project.
Under the main construction.
Right.
Okay.
So if during construction we run into an issue, then the contractor and the district both have allowances and contingencies that we can pull from that can help pay for those overages. But
okay.
As a guaranteed maximum price for the construction.
Okay, and then was there another part of the contingency somewhere else?
No, it's mainly in the construction costs now.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, as far as project commitments, at our last report, we had 19.7 million. Now we added 49.3 million. You can see that 49.1 million addition for Erickson Hall construction is our main addition, and that was for the second increment of the project. For those that are new, the first increment was kind of developing the land and getting the land ready for construction. And then increment 2 was the actual construction of the school. So we split it out into 2 increments, leaving us with 69 million in current commitments.
Mark, it looks like Mark Magenti has a question.
Okay.
Yes, I just I noticed you have an asterisk there that showed that some items were paid for out of, I guess, your Melrose budget, and I was just wondering how you determine whether something gets paid out of that budget versus the Measure MM bond funds. And I guess related to that also, is expenditures of the Melrose funds part of the purview of this committee, or is there another committee making sure those funds are spent correctly?
Those expenditures are technically under the purview of the board. They act as the board of the Community Facilities District, but we wanted to show this Citizens Oversight Committee what the actual project costs were. So we're showing the other funding sources for this project.
Also, Mark, this is Rob. The Melrose funding was geographically oriented. In other words, it related to the development of a particular area of the district as opposed to the GEO bonds, which are district-wide. So there were a much more limited range of projects that those Melrose funds could be expended on.
Right, and when we were working with the land from the beginning, we had already started charging the legal fees towards the CFT because that was our initial available funding. And so we just kept that there, and we have our bond, which the majority of the funds will go towards the construction of Erickson Hall. So just to minimize the vendors that would be coming from the CFT, we just have our legal and our main construction coming from there.
Thanks.
Okay, so currently we have about 943,000 in current expenditures, which a majority of it, as we can see, is from the initial start of construction for the school through Erickson Hall. They are starting to set up their work site, and so we're preparing for the groundbreaking for that.
Kathy, do you have a question?
I do. The one question, I have a couple, but the first one is on the vendor detail summary at the bottom of 36. There is something that says expired check, and it's a negative 2,400. And I'm just wondering exactly what that is. And does that just mean that it is already too old and it will need to be replaced, and therefore the budget is still there? It's just a actual check needs to get voided out type
Right.
thing?
It was one of the fees to the city of San Diego that we had to pay, and they actually didn't cash it. And so when we called them, they did say that we'll have to pay it later. They just didn't cash it yet because they didn't get to that part in the project. So at 6 months, our checks expire. And so that one was past 6 months. So we'll have to pay it again later when.
Okay,
when
it will be reissued.
Yes.
So that's why the budget's back in there. It's because you took it out of the check, basically kind of voiding it.
Right.
Okay.
So we can see above there's still a remaining balance of 2,400.
Okay, got that. I have a little bit bigger question on regards to page 35. The balance in the column totals up to 59,502,533, and I was trying to kind of compare that or understand how that might compare to the remaining commitment column on page 36, which totals 54,556,397. Not 100% sure that they should tie. I would think that they would tie, but then I was looking at the individual component numbers, like architect fees for one, at 641,751 on page 35. But on page 36, the number that's remaining commitment is a lower number. Is that just timing difference between commitments, or not really sure how to reconcile them?
36, that's the budget page. And so we budgeted 2.6 million for architects, but in actual contracts that the board has approved, they've only approved up to just under 2.6 million. So it's just a difference in the budget. And then also there's a few $1 million, which is still for furniture and equipment that hasn't been committed for yet. And technology, I think, are some of the major components of that.
Okay, so on page 36, these are actual, I don't know, what do you call these? Actual bids or actual contracts awarded?
Correct.
Okay, and that's why there's the difference, because these are the actual contracts and the other one is just the general budget.
Right, and expenditures, so the budget compared to expenditures.
Okay.
And the amount that is remaining after the expenses.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Joe, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks. So I was following along with what Kathy was asking, and and I think maybe something that would be helpful just to get me up to speed, maybe some other members too, is maybe just on a process level where there's additions. So I'm looking here, there's additions, reductions to original commitments, and then those commitments change May 31 and move forward. So can you just explain a little bit about, so something happens along the way, for example, legal costs, you've talked about the litigation. I understand an addition was necessary. These additions that we see here, have these already been, so say if there's an agreement that has a cap out, not to exceed, and then I assume that has to do with like the commitments column on like the 228, and then there's an addition. Are those additions approved prior to this log coming to the COC? Or is there, when we talk about commitments, is this a commitment that's still pending board action? I'm just trying to understand the nuances here of how this all works together and what we're actually looking at. Are these it seems like these are expenditures that have already been paid out, and additions to a set budget have already been made. And so this is just a report as opposed to any other type of feedback on the charges. So if you can just follow along. A lot of questions there, sorry.
Yeah, no, sure. Let me know if I don't answer exactly what you needed. But the first, kind of where the numbers start, the first three columns are the commitments. So as of February 28th, the board has approved in contracts $19.7 million. And then through May 31st, the new board approved contracts, and they are the board approved ones. We don't put them on here until they're board approved. So is 49.3 million. So they are just contracts that are approved, and not the actual expenditures are on the next portion, which we show 943,000 as the actual expenditures for the period. So for those 3-month periods, we spent 943,000 against those open contracts. Does that help?
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand, so as added expenses come up, then staff is taking amendments to the board to adjust the contracts for those added expenditures, and then that's just what's being reported out here, right?
Right. On a quarterly basis, we'll bring the changes that have been approved by the board and the expenditures.
You go to the next page, Mark.
Yes. And then our final project is the Delmar Hills Modernization. So the last meeting, we had a budget of 19.4 million. We had initially split out the field project because we thought we were going to complete the field earlier then, but now it is part of the modernization that we're working with Leonakis as the architect. So we have a budget of just under 20 million. And there's been very minimal expenses on this project so far. Originally, Baker Nowicki was going to help us with the field first, but now that that had been delayed, the contract is with Leonakis now, and we can see the addition of 360,000 as we adjusted the total main construction budget. Their contract is based off of kind of like a tiered structure. So we finalized the contract with them. So far we've had just under 15,000 in expenditures. Kathy?
I had a question in regards to the Baker Nowicki $3,900 that is showing up as commitments as of February 28th. When I compared it to last board meeting or COC meeting, it wasn't originally on the February 28th. So I'm wondering if it really needs to be an addition on both the commitment column and the expenditure column, or it really was committed for, but last meeting it just was missed and left off. That's
right.
My
so
question.
Originally we kind of had them as two separate projects.
So it was on the other project?
Right. They were working on the field, but now we've combined them into one project and working with Leonakis on initial design development. It just made more sense to combine the two projects with our timeline now. So
Okay.
we have only paid them $3,900.
Okay. I don't see in last February's information, was there a separate page for the field project that had the 3,900 commitment? Because I guess I don't see that in the packet.
There should have been. I can go back and look.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't see it in the packet I had, but I don't know, maybe a page was missing or something. I'm not sure. So it should just be on a separate budget for the field, and you're just now combining them into one. I guess I'm still a little confused because on my last one, it said the total budget was last time, February 28th, expenditures through was the same 19,975,957. So I'm not sure when it got combined, but not really able to track that.
Kathy, I just looked and it was on page 74 of the package. So it was the last page where we had the Delmar Hills Academy field upgrade, and that it showed the project separately. And if you go down to the bottom, you can see the 3,900 for Baker Nowicki. And what we did was just, move those that budget and those expenditures up into one project, because like Mark was explaining, just the timing and the way that the project was running, it made more sense to combine them rather than to have them separate.
Okay. Okay, because back in February, they were split out separately.
That's correct.
Is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the 3,900 wasn't a current expenditure. It was something that was on there from November, because on page 74, it shows as an expenditure from November, as of November 30th, 2020.
That's correct. It shows it as of November, but as we roll up the project, then it comes, because it was shown in February 28th, it kind of rolls up in that manner.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's our last project right now that we're working on. So if there's any other questions, we can answer that, or that is the end of the expenditure log.
All right, thank you, Mark. That takes us to...
I still see some raised hands, so I'm not sure if
okay.
Questions, or maybe just forgot to put your hand down.
Who had a question? Kathy?
I had another question. Yeah, I had another question here. And thank you for going through this with me. I'm just trying to get up to speed. So I think the last question I had to do with, as we go through these logs, is there an ability to understand what the original budget projections were for these projects, so we can compare actuals against start?
Yes, I can add a column in there if we would like. I can do that on the next report out. Yeah, these are for, these are all for your benefit. So if there's ever anything else that you'd like to add, then we can definitely add. So I'll make
I would find that helpful. I don't know how others feel about that, but that would be helpful to see.
Okay, I'll bring that to the next meeting.
I had a question. I think it may be the same question Joe just asked a different way, but if we see commitments for a project, can we assume that is basically a cost to complete the project that for that school, or I think this was what Joe was asking. Is that, what's the relationship between the commitment total and the overall budget for maybe a school project?
So the commitment total is the contracts that we've awarded to date. And so sometimes, depending on the place we are in the project, initially, the commitments may only be the architect because we don't have the contractor in place yet. So the commitment may only be the architect, which is lowering the budget amount, as opposed to the budget is what we're kind of expecting for the entire project cost.
Yeah, I think it's related to my earlier question, which is where do you go to find out what's the expected total cost to complete that school's work? And eventually the commitments will equal that. But you don't know if the commitments are 50% of the expected total project costs or you're 90% of, it's not easy to tell.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration. Usually we'll look at the revised budget as the total expected budget to complete the project. So every quarter we'll update the budget for any changes that have happened. And that's kind of the new expectation of what the whole project will cost.
So
kind of the third from the right. So if we look there, we're anticipating the Pacific High School to cost about $74 million now.
Right. For some of the other projects, which haven't really started or are in the early phases, though, the commitments don't reflect the expected cost of the whole project, though, right?
Right now they're estimates. So for like Delmar Hills, we haven't finalized the hard costs. And so that's just kind of what the 14.8 million, Chris?
Delmar Hills?
Yes. Delmar Hills, the 14.8 million is kind of what we're expecting for the hard costs for that project. And then we have about 5% in our contingencies, and our soft costs, which is everything else, is about 30%. So our soft costs include things like architect fees. We have to have construction monitoring, inspection going on. So those are kind of some of our soft costs.
Or for example, last meeting for Pacific Sky, we did not have the increments. So this project being big and needing to get moving, we had our contractors bid it in 2 phases. So there was a phase 1, which was the commitment at the last at 4.4 million. And then phase 2 was just approved by the board. So last time it would show commitments of 19.7 million. Now we're almost the full budget committed because that big commitment for the full construction. So as another example, where as we commit more money and the board approves more money, that actual commitment line will get larger, while the budget changes only if we have to add to the budget because of something like this, where escalation overran what we had hoped to spend by a little bit.
Okay, I understand. So the $69 million is close to the budgeted amount. I was just wondering, where are the budgeted amounts?
And then the first page, Mark, is typically a budget page. So we kind of do a budget page and then we'll do a commitment page to kind of then compare.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for your comments, and I'll make sure to bring that back at the next meeting, Joe, about the original budgets.
Thank you, Mark. So that takes us to item K, project progress update. Chris, you're back on.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, so, and for those, our new COC members, each month I'll do a project progress update as well. So Mark will talk about the costs and the budgeting, and then we'll look at the actual projects that we are involved in. And so this month we'll look at Pacific Sky School, Delmar Heights School Rebuild, Delmar Hills Academy Modernization, our Sycamore Ridge play structures, and some classroom modifications. So Pacific Sky School did just start construction. We had some delays with the city and moving through coastal permitting, but we obtained that permit on May 14th, and we're able to start construction on May 17th. The project has had to shave off 5 months, but we are working with our contractors to be able to still open the school August 15th of 2022. There still will be some work finishing up some pieces, but the students in the admin building and lunch and all those things should be ready to go. So as I said, coastal development permits came in May 14th, and we were able to hit the ground running on May 17th with construction. We still anticipate the school opening on August 15th, and then final full completion and handover of the full property will be the very beginning of the new year, 2023. Delmar Heights School rebuilds. We've touched on this a little bit. with the litigation. The litigation has led to further environmental review, and so we are in the process of a focused environmental impact report. And we had a notice of preparation that went out for 30 days, and we received some comments on that. We then made a notice, posted a notice of availability and distributed a draft focused environmental impact report on April 28th, and that public comment period will end June 11th. And then we anticipate, pending response to comments, but distributing a final focused environmental impact report in response to comment documents on or about June 18th. That will then be published for 10 days, and then we would anticipate board action the meeting on June 30th. Next steps after that, so we're receiving and responding to comments, and we'll distribute that final focused environmental impact report, and then the board will have an opportunity to act on that. After board approval, we would be able to bring that back to the court, and upon resolution of the litigation, we would resume the coastal development permit application process, which would be the final step towards moving into construction of the Delmar Heights rebuild. The Delmar Hills Academy modernization, we have just started moving forward on. We have a community planning session schedule set up. Tomorrow night, we will be doing our first community meeting, and then we will have meetings in September and October, followed by a board review of a general plan in October that will allow us to go into schematic design and design development so that we can move into the modernization of that project. And then we have a couple smaller projects underway. We have at Sycamore Ridge, we had school play structures that were getting to the end and almost past the end of their useful life, and some cracks and age showing. And so we are replacing the kindergarten, primary, and upper grade play structures. This is a rendering of one of those play structures that will be replaced. I think this is the primary play structure. And so we'll be doing an update. Part of this is built upon the work we've done at the new school and the rebuild. And this is emblematic of some of the work that we'll do in replacing play structures across the district, as we have a number of them starting to age. And then finally, we've been doing classroom modernizations. And with these, we are doing 23 classrooms this summer, including carpet and whiteboards and removal of some of the outdated casework and furniture so that we can impact the classroom. And the goal has always been to impact the classroom and the learning in our classrooms across the district. And so we've been doing work with classrooms each summer on small numbers so that we can make impacts to the schools, as well as get input from our teachers and continue to refine and improve the classroom and learning going on in our schools across the district. And so those are the major projects we have going on right now, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Bruce,
Yes.
what would be left to do between the opening of Pacific Sky School in August and then the full completion in January? So
we will be doing the after school program classrooms will need to be completed. The district kitchen will need to be completed. There will be some work on the field to be completed. What will be complete will be the kindergarten and the kindergarten play area, all of the classroom buildings and the parking lot, and then the lunch area and play area. And so we prioritized to be able to open the school so we could get those necessary areas so that we could be operational and running at August 15th because of the time lost through the permitting process with the city.
Okay,
Chris, this is Rob. So there will be a separation between the students on the Sky School versus the construction, a barrier of some type to keep the kids away from the construction area.
And it works out nicely because the classroom stuff is the ASP after school program and the kitchen are right at the north end. So it'll be, and actually it has its own driveway for the kitchen. So it will be, we've also looked at that so that it will be fairly easily separated so that we can obviously run the school safely and make sure that our students and staff have a great learning experience when they start out.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions for Chris on item K?
I just have a quick question. And I know we've talked about this briefly in the past, but is there any way, I mean, we've talked about how the litigation has delayed things and that has in turn caused more expenses for the Delmar Heights rebuild. Is there any way to recoup some of those costs through, like, I mean, as things have gone on, or like at all? I don't know.
The litigation costs?
Yeah, I mean the litigation costs, but also like we're having to pay for busing again for another year, or like portables again for another year, and those kinds of things that really, I mean, really now are coming out of the budgets of other projects across the district, right?
Let me try to answer Katie's question. There isn't a way to recover lost costs and delay costs against the litigants on the Delmar Heights School.
The only funds that we've been able to recover is through our JPA. And I think on the last expenditure report, we did have 50,000 coming back to the district from what our insurance has helped us cover. But that was all that was able to be covered. Joe, I see you have a question.
Yeah, hi. And following along with what Katie was explaining, I was thinking actually the same thing. And it is an interesting question, how much, because of the litigation for Delmar Heights, have we had to draw from other projects? This is kind of getting at my question earlier about the original budget. It's just trying to piece together where money was originally allocated and how that draw gets pulled to, to pay for the expenses on Delmar Heights, plus the added environmental costs as well. And so just generally, how would we be able to follow that? And then the second question I had was with attorney's fees, is there a request for attorney's fees that's part of this?
I can answer the second question. The litigants actually requested their attorney's fees from the district, basically saying they were compelled to sue the district, and that they quote unquote won because a few narrow items the judge ruled in their favor. What they overlook is that the vast majority of the issues that they raised were not accepted by the court. And I don't believe that the issue relative to granting of attorney's fees has been finally resolved yet. But the district, needless to say, is opposing that. The principal litigant partner at our firm, Wendy Wiles, sits in the office next to me, so I'm kind of generally aware of what's going on. As to the first question, I mean, we could look at what the original target budget for the Heights was in terms of costs versus time. There have been added costs as a result of delays. Whether or not there's increases in construction costs is anybody's guess, because we never really got to the point of taking bids on the Delmar Heights School.
Right, and so we will bring back the original budget as you had requested to the next meeting, so that way you can see in more detail what the costs have been. But we do budget some for legal fees in all of our projects, so it might not be as high of an increase right now until we know the full impact of what the escalation is on the hard costs.
Any other questions on item K? Katie, you look like you have another question.
I just have a comment, and this is maybe a silly comment, but I have a student who is in a modernized classroom right now, and I can tell you from the student perspective that they love the new furniture and they love their classroom. He thinks it's awesome. So
that's wonderful to hear. And that really speaks to why we've prioritized impacting classrooms each year, because we can't modernize every school every year, but we can make impacts to every school every year. And so I think that's been a focus to find ways. And there will be, we've been having some conversation with the ability to keep making these impacts. It will actually decrease a little bit on what we need to budget for modernization of classrooms, because we're able to do some of that rolling over year over year. So there's some of that where the total budgets are going to shift over time too, when we see that we can make this impact each year. It's all that money was going to be spent one way or another. It's just when it's spent, obviously. But
Any other items on questions or comments on K? Okay, thank you very much, Chris.
Welcome.
We now go to item L, and I'm not going to propose, given the fact that we just have incoming COC members, but let me kind of briefly discuss, and maybe Chris or Mark, you could circulate to the new COC members our discussion paper on officers for the Citizens Oversight Committee. In general, we recommend, as the legal counsel, 3 officers for the committee: a chairperson, who essentially does what I'm doing, is chairs the meeting; a vice chair, who would act if the chair is not able to be at a meeting; and a secretary, who is essentially the counter-signatory for official documents such as minutes and annual reports for the committee. This has been a standing item for each COC meeting because I keep hoping that the COC will depose me as chairperson. They have not chosen to do so, and Katie's shaking her head. Ira, one of the former board members, vehemently opposed my being deposed. So we will keep this on. It will appear at the agenda for our next meeting. But if you desire to stick your hand up, be a chairperson, vice chair, or secretary, and again, Chris or Mark will send you the document that discusses those, we will take that up at our next meeting. Questions on item L? All right.
I just do need somebody to sign the minutes. So is it okay if we have Katie sign the minutes since she had motioned to?
And that'll work just fine in the interim.
Okay. Katie will send you that after the meeting.
Okay. We then go to item M. The committee's process has normally been to set committee meetings one at a time for the next following committee meeting, usually about 3 months apart, which puts us into early September or right around Labor Day of 2021. Labor Day, I think, is September 6th, which means we could schedule the meeting. And again, some committee members have preferences as to what days of the week work for them. But we might want to think about the week of September 6th or the week of September 13th, the following week after Labor Day. We may want to think more carefully about the week of the 13th, since a lot of people disappear on Labor Day week. Are there any suggestions? And I think staff's preference moving into this meeting is the governing board of the school district will go to all in person at their June board meeting. In other words, the governing board members and the public will be back in an in-person forum. I think staff's preference would be to have the next committee meeting also go to the all in-person forum, which will be at the district offices. And Chris, remind me of the address there.
Yeah, so that'd be 11232 El Camino Real. But I'd also like to suggest potentially if we had a meeting in September that we could consider meeting and going to Sycamore Ridge. We have the play structures that we're doing, and we have classroom modernization. So we could look at 2 of the programs, 2 of the projects, a little bit smaller, but 2 projects that have been funded by Measure MM. I don't think that Pacific Sky School will be quite the interesting project yet, because it's going to basically in September, it will be, we might have some slab on the ground, but I think I'd want to delay that one a little bit until it was more exciting. We might have some walls up and something, exciting to bring the COC to. But so I would suggest if the COC is interested, that we consider Sycamore Ridge and holding the meeting at Sycamore Ridge. Should we do a site walk? I would also we may want to look at truncating the agenda a little bit so that we can do a site walk, unless the committee would like to consider a longer meeting, because if we do a site walk and we have the full meeting, so we may want to kind of look at our agenda just a little bit if we're going to do a site walk and spend some time with that. So things to consider that I wanted to bring up for the committee.
And needless to say, if we did a site walk, it'd have to be an in-person meeting. Any thoughts on days of the week, days of the month, and whether or not Chris's suggestion of Sycamore Ridge School would be acceptable to the COC members? Feel free to speak up. Is there any day of the week that is better or worse for people? needless to say, it's probably going to be a Monday through a Thursday.
Yeah, I think from my end, I think it's a great idea to see the work, and so I think I would very much agree that going to Sycamore Ridge makes sense. And then I imagine we'll have to coordinate around any after school schedules potentially for Sycamore Ridge. But my vote, Thursdays would be quite reasonable on my end, but curious about everyone else.
So send it Thursdays. Anybody else?
And I also vote the week after Labor Day, not the week of Labor Day, just because people will probably still be out.
I think that's the 16th. Somebody check me, Michelle. That's the 16th of September.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we did the site walk, we'd want to do it first thing, because by the time we get to about 5:30 in September, we'll be losing the light. So is there any objection to 5:30 Thursday, the 16th of September at Sycamore Ridge School?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I don't have any objection to that day per se, but normally Thursdays are not quite as good for me on an ongoing basis. So yeah, I could definitely make that one work, but I would prefer it not to be Thursdays on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so why don't we, well, again, we generally tend to look at meetings on a case-by-case basis, but thank you for that, Kathy. I'm open to a motion to designate the next COC meeting as Thursday, the 16th of September, 5:30 at Sycamore Ridge School. Can I get a motion to that effect?
I move that so.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Is there I'm sorry, somebody
Second.
came in with a second. Okay, that's ended. Any other discussion? Michelle, roll call, please.
Katie,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Aye.
Joe,
Yes.
Okay, so we have, that's our target for the next meeting. Chris, why don't we set it up with the concept that we will start as soon as we convene that meeting. We'll start with the site walk. How long do you think a site walk would take, Chris?
I think that we could do that within a half an hour to look at the three play structures and a couple of classrooms.
Okay. Well, we're into more than an hour and a half of this meeting, but next time we will not have introductions. We won't have to go through F, G, and H on the presentations, which was about 25 minutes. So why don't we stick with our normal agenda items? And if we, get to the point where people are just flagging, we'll maybe push that off to the next meeting.
So one comment. I just got a text message from somebody I think is watching, a parent that's watching, that pointed out that date is Yom Kippur. So if that concerns anyone,
Yeah.
I want to move to change it.
No, great catch. Maybe
Is
the week
anybody-
after?
We could move it back to the 23rd. It's getting kind of late into September. I'm worried about having enough light to work with.
Would it be possible to move it to Tuesday the 14th?
That would work for me.
Does anybody
That works
object?
great.
Anybody object to Tuesday the 14th?
I would have trouble on a Tuesday. I'd make my best effort, but
Would Wednesday be better, Sandeep?
Monday or Thursday would actually, if it works for other people. Tuesday, Wednesday, it's unpredictable.
Monday's fine with me.
Monday's fine for me too.
I
Okay,
can
so
make
that'd
Monday
be-
work.
That'd be the 13th. Okay, I need a motion to change the meeting time from the 16th to the 13th.
Motion to move the date of the meeting from the 16th to the 13th of September.
It's Katie. Is there a
Second.
second? I'm sorry, who's second?
Sandeep,
Okay.
second.
Okay, Michelle, roll call again, please.
Katie,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Sandeep,
Aye.
Joe.
Did we get Joe's vote?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we have to hear you, Joe. There's that phrase, you're on mute, and then followed by you're still on mute. Okay, so that takes us past item M. Item N is a opportunity for the COC members to simply comment on any items and anything you'd like to see done or see agendized, or comments on my performance as the chair.
Excellent. You're going to have to do this for another decade at this rate.
Yeah, trust me, I've been doing it for 2 years, and the committee seems to have no interest in deposing me. Any other comments? Okay.
I just wanted to say also, I don't think you're going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Thank you for your service, but I did want to say just I see that there's staff and the superintendent, and just as we wind down with the school year, I think we can all say the same thing, that you guys have done an excellent year, and it's awesome to be able to say thank you before the school year ends. So keep it up. And I think that it's really great to see these projects moving forward despite COVID. So good job on that front.
Okay, so we will work, staff and myself will work on the agenda for the next meeting. We're targeted for 5:30. We will lead off with the walking tour, which will let Chris decide where he's going to take us and what Measure MM projects we can actually see the money going into the schools with. Thank you all for attending. Michelle, I have 7:09 as our agenda time, as our adjournment time. Thank you all, and we will see you on September 13th. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.